Hello everybody, my name is Asher, and in this video I will rank all 32 NFL teams from worst to best based off their current season. Although I will mainly use the team standings as a way to judge on how good or bad they are, please note that they aren't the only factor in determining if they are trash or not. I will also take note of teams that greatly improved after an embarrassing streak of losses and were able to find better success in the future games despite their flaws. Also, I will be mostly using images in this video because if I use actual game footage, the NFL Mafia will come after me and bust my kneecaps. So, let's start off with the video with the worst NFL team of this season. Number 32, Carolina Panthers. Yeah, without a doubt, the Panthers are the worst team in the NFL, and it sucks because their fans didn't really do anything to deserve this embarrassment. I mean, to start off, the team just doesn't have any major talent right now, and they also have a rookie quarterback with a useless O-line that can't even protect him. The coaching is also just terrible, and the founder is just failing this team by making terrible decisions like trading Christian McCaffrey before the season even started. They also have the worst standing in the league, going 2-15, and have 0 away game wins. And they don't even have a first-round pick for the next season either. Overall, this F-tier team is just an embarrassment to the NFL, and Panthers fans just want it to be 2015 again. Number 31, Washington Commanders. Similar to the Panthers, this team is also pretty garbage this season with a horrid 4-13 negative record, and with only one home field win. Keep in mind, the Commanders' 4 wins aren't that impressive, and they are against average/bad teams like the Cardinals, Patriots, Falcons, and Broncos. Not to mention, after their win against the Patriots, they lost 8 times in a row and will still be on that streak next season. The Commanders also have one of the worst defenses in the league, and because of that, their losing games are often blowouts. The entire NFC East division rivals also all own the Commanders, since the Commanders failed to even get one win against the Eagles, Giants, and Cowboys. So yeah, Washington is a pretty awful team this year and get an F ranking. Number 30, New England Patriots. Ever since the Patriots lost Tom Brady, they have never been the same dynasty that they once were. Like, this team went from 6 Super Bowl titles in the span of 17 years to going 4-13 this season with only one home win. The Patriots' most embarrassing game has to be the October Saints game at Gillette Stadium. The average Saints dropped a 34-score spanking at the Patriots' own home field, while the Patriots dropped absolutely nothing. The final nail in the coffin was when they lost their final game to the Jets at their own home field, even though they used to own the Jets when the Patriots were in their prime a few years back. The only good thing that happened in their season is somehow the Patriots were able to beat the Buffalo Bills. Yeah, I'm going to have to give New England an F tier. Their dynasty days are over. Number 29, Arizona Cardinals. Similar to both the Commanders and Patriots, the Cardinals also went 4-13 for their season. However, their wins are definitely more impressive since they had 2 wins at home, and they're also able to massively upset both the Eagles and the Cowboys. Even though this team is still F tier, I do think next season they will improve greatly, and their future won't seem so bleak. Number 28, Los Angeles Chargers. Surprisingly, the Chargers actually started out pretty okay with some wins here and there, and their losses still being close games, but what really destroyed their season was a Raiders game where the Raiders were able to drop a massive 42 points by the end of halftime. And by the end of the game, the score was 63-21. Their head coach Brandon Stanley was also fired for his failures at that game. At the end, the Bolts went 5-12, and I'm going to give the Chargers a D tier, and I do think their next season will be better with Jim Harbaugh leading the team. Number 27, New York Giants. In the beginning of the season, the Giants were a pretty terrible team, with their first game of the season being a loss with a score of 40-0 to the Cowboys. They were really only able to beat bad teams and were steamrolled by good teams at first. However, by the end of their season, they actually started to do significantly better, like with their impressive wins against the Packers in their last Eagles game. They were also able to keep up with the first Eagles game and Rams game despite them losing them. Their final standings was 6-11. I'll give Giants a D for their improvements. Number 26, Tennessee Titans. Even though I don't think the Titans are that great this year, they are definitely the best of the bad teams due to their surprisingly impressive games they've won despite their bad offense. For instance, they were able to destroy the Bengals very early on in their season. They somehow won against the Miami Dolphins later on, and they completely shattered the dreams of every Jaguars fans by destroying their postseason chances. The Titans went 6-11 this year, and overall, I'm going to give the Titans a D rating, but they should have never fired Mike Vrabel. Number 25, New York Jets. Now, I know a lot of Jets fans were heartbroken when their savior Aaron Rodgers got immediately injured for the rest of the season, but despite that, the Jets were able to get some pretty good wins against some pretty good teams. For instance, when Rodgers got injured, they were able to beat the Buffalo Bills despite their loss and pulled one of the biggest upsets of the year when they beat the Eagles for the first time in franchise history. They were also able to destroy the Houston Texans and ended their heartbreaking season on a positive note by owning their lifelong rivals, the Patriots. The Jets went 7-10 despite their misfortune, so I'll give Jets a C tier for their mixed season since they had some good games and some bad games. Number 24, Atlanta Falcons. Even though the Falcons aren't bad, the problem with them is that even though 6 out of 10 of their losses were really close, they still added up and ultimately got a slightly negative record for not being able to finish those games with wins. It also doesn't help that their final 2 games were a slaughter for them with the Bears and their rivals, the Saints. Overall, the Falcons are C tier with their 7-10 record, but they need to find a way to secure wins instead of losing close games. Number 23, Chicago Bears. The Bears are probably the most inconsistent team in the NFL right now. Throughout the season, they have multiple close losses, close wins, blowout losses, and blowout wins. This team can't make up its mind if it's good or garbage and went 7-10. Justin Fields is also really inconsistent too, with his good and bad plays throughout the season. Luckily this year, the Bears are confirmed to have the first round pick and will hopefully improve from their C tier rating. Number 22, Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings' problem this season is they are unable to finish close games with a win and instead sadly lose a lot of winnable games by just a hair. Their biggest example of this is in the Bengals game. The Vikings choked a 14-point lead and lost in overtime despite having possession first. It also doesn't help that they lost their quarterback Kirk Cousins in Week 8 and were unable to find a stable replacement and constantly switched quarterbacks trying to solve the problem. They went 7-10 by the end of their season, and the Vikings had a decent C ranked year, but I do think they'll be much better next season. Number 21, Las Vegas Raiders. Overall, the Raiders were a decent C-tier team that went 8-9, and their most impressive wins this season was the dominant victory over the Chargers, where they scored 63-21. And they also beat the Chiefs Christmas Day at their home field and ruined Christmas for Chiefs fans. I do think the Raiders have a pretty good future with Antonio Pierce as their head coach, and their defense was always strong to begin with. Number 20, Denver Broncos. The Broncos are probably the second most improved team in the NFL, when the Broncos started off terribly with a loss to their rivals, the Raiders, on game day. In their second game, they lost to the crappy Commanders, and their third, they were destroyed by the Dolphins with a score of 70-20. However, Denver was able to get it together and finish 8-9 with their best win streak being 5. They were also able to beat good teams like the Bills, Broncos, Packers, and had an amazing blowout victory over the Chiefs. Overall, the Broncos were a decent C-ranked team. Number 19, Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I know a lot of people are probably asking why I put the Eagles in C tier when their record is 11-6 and they made it to the wildcard week playoffs, but their choking this year is so bad and embarrassing, it brings them all the way down here. In the first 5 games they played, the Eagles are able to win all of them, but lost their streak over in the 6th game with the Jets. However, they won another 5 games after their setback with more impressive teams like the Dolphins, Cowboys, Chiefs, and Bills. They had the amazing 10-1 record and were scheduled to make the NFC East division title. Then their dad, the 49ers, returned home with the belt and laid an ass beating, and the Eagles lost 42-19 with a home field advantage. After that game, the Eagles' performance was just insufferable and embarrassing. In the next 5 games they had left, they got destroyed by the Cowboys, lost a close game with the Seahawks, and barely won against the Giants. They also somehow lost to the Cardinals and then got destroyed by the Giants again right next to their playoff schedule. Then to add to insult to injury, they were completely outclassed by the Buccaneers, with the score being 32-9 in the playoffs. The coordinator of the Eagles should be ashamed of themselves for putting on a facade for this long. Number 18, New Orleans Saints. Saints are probably the most disappointing team since they are able to have a good offense and defense, but they sadly either choke a lot of winnable games or are very inconsistent with their plays. It's really disappointing because they could have easily won the NFC South division since that division isn't really that good, and they only had 1 bad loss, which was with the first time they faced the Buccaneers, and their other losses being close games. Despite their problems, they were still able to go 9-8 and had 2 really good final games by beating both their rivals, the Buccaneers and Falcons. So I'll give them a B, and I will look forward to their future. Number 17, Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals started off bad in their season when they had Joe Burrow play with an injured leg, which caused 3 losses early on. Eventually, Burrow healed, and the Bengals are able to get some good wins, like with the Seahawks, 49ers, and Bills. However, when Joe Burrow was injured again at the Ravens game, their season was pretty much relying on Jake Browning to finish the job and go to the postseason, but sadly that didn't happen despite Browning actually being a good backup quarterback. However, one flaw still remained with the Bengals, and it's that they lost 5 out of their 6 games when they faced a divisional opponent. And their only one win was against the Browns with their backups at the end of their season. Despite the problems with the Bengals, they were still able to finish 9-8, and the future will hopefully be better when Joe Burrow returns. Number 16, Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars were a pretty good B-ranked team this year. However, their fatal flaw was that they could not beat great teams like the 49ers, Browns, and Ravens. They also had probably one of the biggest chokes in this season when they lost to the terrible Titans shortly before the postseason, which directly ended their playoff spots, despite them winning 4 out of 6 games with their divisional rival opponents. They also had 4 straight losses near the end of the season, which didn't help. The Jaguars still have a good future, though, and hopefully next year their fans can see better success. Number 15, Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks were a pretty good team this season due to having a good defense and a solid offense. Their most impressive wins were against teams like the Browns, Eagles, and Lions. However, their major flaw is that they cannot beat the divisional teams like the Rams and 49ers, and their only 2 divisional wins are against the Cardinals, who aren't even that good. Overall, Seattle gets a B, but in the future they would have better success if they can do better against their division. Number 14, Indiana Colts. The Colts sadly had bad luck this season when their quarterback, Anthony Richardson, was unavailable after the first 3 games they won, and they were forced to use a backup. However, Gardner Minshew was a good backup quarterback and was able to win a lot of games despite their setback, and were close to getting to a playoff spot, but they sadly lost the game to the Texans. Overall, I think the Colts are a B-tier team and will have better luck in the future when their main quarterback is ready to play. Number 13, Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers are without a doubt the most improved team in this NFL season because in the beginning they were suffering from having a terrible offensive coordinator named Matt Canada, and they had a terrible quarterbacks like Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky. However, after their embarrassing losses to the Cardinals, Patriots, and Colts, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was able to save Christmas for the Steelers fans, and they made it to the playoffs with a 10-7 record. I will give Steelers a B rank for their improvement over how bad the team originally was, the fact that they were able to make the playoffs even though they lost in them. Number 12, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers are a pretty good NFL team and deserve a B ranking for having a 9-8 record and were able to make it to the playoff divisional round. Even in the games they lost, the score was still usually close, with their only major loss being the first time they faced the Lions, where they went 20-6. Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield were also good players this season and had many great performances. This team will most likely have a good future in the next season. Number 11, Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins were a great team this season, and I will give them an A ranking since the Dolphins are usually able to win and dominate teams that are either bad or decent besides the Titans. The only flaw is that they are not able to beat better teams like the Bills, Chiefs, and the Ravens, with the exception of the Cowboys that they did beat by 2 points. They also had a lot of costly injuries by the time they were in the playoffs, like Raheem Mostert and Jalen Waddle. Overall, the Miami Dolphins are a great team, but they need to be able to figure out how to beat teams that are good. Number 10, Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns were a great team and had an amazing defense with players like Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith, and Denzel Ward. Despite their team having multiple injuries, including their star quarterback Deshaun Watson, they were able to finish 11-6 with their clutch quarterback Joe Flacco and made it to the playoffs. Sadly, despite their best efforts, it wasn't enough to win a playoff game, but they still had a great year, and Brownies have a lot to look forward to. Number 9, Dallas Cowboys. Generally speaking, the Cowboys were a great team and are usually able to dominate bad teams and went undefeated at home in the regular season. Their key players were CeeDee Lamb, Tyler Smith, Dak Prescott, and their amazing kicker, Brandon Aubrey. However, the Cowboys had 2 major flaws that kept them at the A ranking. First, they are 500 times better at playing at their home field. They are significantly worse when playing away, and I'm not too sure why that is. Not to mention, the Cowboys always choke in the playoffs ever since the 90s. If the Cowboys ever want to see a Super Bowl ring, they'll need to overcome their struggles in the playoffs and win games that are not in their home stadium. Number 8, Los Angeles Rams. At first, it seemed like the Rams were a pretty average team this season. However, Sean McVay was able to overcome their problems and became a pretty amazing team with talented players like Aaron Donald, Matthew Stafford, and Cooper Kupp. They went 10-7 at the end and were able to make it to the playoffs, but sadly they had a great game against the Lions, but they still had a heartbreaking loss by just 1 point. Overall, the Rams get an A, and they have a pretty bright future. Number 7, Houston Texans. The Houston Texans are probably the most improved team in terms of comparing past season performances. Before this season started, the Texans were a laughingstock due to them only winning 11 games in the past 3 seasons. However, during the draft, DeMeco Ryans acquired C.J. Stroud, who turned out to be an amazing quarterback, and other talented players like Tank Dell and Will Anderson and Nico Collins also helped the Texans go 10-7 at the end of this season. The Texans were also able to win a playoff game despite them being incredibly young, and it was a blowout win against the Browns. Even though they lost badly to the Ravens, the Texans have an amazing team right now, and with more playoff experience, they could definitely win a Super Bowl in a few years. Number 6, Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers started off as a good team with a major flaw that was having a bad defense and had a terrible defensive coordinator named Joe Barry. An example of the Packers' defense being bad is when they let the Panthers score 30 points on them and they barely won the game by 3 points. However, when the playoffs came around, Jordan Love played amazing against the Cowboys and had a close game with the 49ers but still lost. Overall, the Packers get an A rank due to their great success with a young team and could be a contender for the Super Bowl in the future if they fix their defense. Number 5, Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills are a great team in the NFL and went 11-6 in the regular season and clinched the division despite them not being on the right track in the beginning. Sadly, the major problems with the Bills is that they do lose a lot of close games that they could have won in the regular season, and they seem to not be able to beat the Kansas City Chiefs / Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs right now. If they overcome those problems, then they could easily win a Super Bowl in the future. Number 4, Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens are an S-tier team and had a 13-4 standing in the regular season, their only somewhat embarrassing loss being the Pittsburgh Steelers in October. They were able to easily clinch their division and made it to the playoffs and won 1 game. However, their major flaw is that they were unable to beat the Chiefs in general, and especially during the playoffs. If they were able to overcome this one flaw, then they would have most likely won the Super Bowl this year, but they choked and fell off short when they could have had a better year. Number 3, Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions had an amazing year and went 12-5 in the regular season. They also had clinched their division, which the last time they did that was in 1993. They were able to win 2 playoff games against the Rams and Buccaneers, and were actually very close to going to the Super Bowl and winning the championship game, but the 49ers came back after the Lions' 17-point lead faded. Dan Campbell's coaching and top players like Jared Goff and Aiden Hutchinson made the Lions season great, and the flaw that they have to work on is if you can't score a touchdown and you're in the lead, then you should take the field goal just to score some points. Overall, the Lions still had an amazing year and will most likely win a Super Bowl in the future. Number 2, San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers this year were an amazing team. They both had an incredible offense and defense, and despite Brock Purdy being a last-round pick, he is still a pretty good quarterback. However, the thing that prevented them from winning the Super Bowl this year was poor play calling by their coach, their kicker being incredibly inconsistent. For example, he's able to hit a world record-breaking kick, but he also failed to make a 1-point conversion by shooting it too low. And another thing is their defense is also kind of inconsistent. Despite the 49ers choking the Super Bowl, they were still an amazing team this year and a well-rounded team too. They went 12-5 in the regular season and won 2 playoff games. Number 1, Kansas City Chiefs. Without a doubt, the Chiefs were the best team this season, and the main reason why they were the best is because they were able to improve themselves despite having a rough start to their season by having embarrassing losses like the Denver Broncos, the Raiders, and the Green Bay Packers, and the Lions. Another reason why the Chiefs are good this year is because they were able to adapt to their new play style by having a more defensive team instead of their last year's more offensive team. And they also were still pretty well balanced, with their quarterback being elite, their offense being good, their defense being good, and their kicker being amazing. Another thing that also helped them win the Super Bowl is that Coach Andy Reid was just a better coach compared to Kyle Shanahan. Another reason why the Chiefs were amazing this year is because despite them having probably the worst playoff schedule this season, they're still able to beat tough opponents like the Miami Dolphins, the Buffalo Bills, the Ravens, and the 49ers, who are the second best team in the league. And right now, they could break a new world record by being the first team in NFL history to win 3 Super Bowls in a row. So did you agree with my list? Let me know in the comments down below, and please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.